Over the course of the years that this class is going on, we've had a number of opportunities to explore the idea about how Torah was different during the first 1,000 years of our history. That means the time of the first Beis HaMikdash, and how things changed as a result of the Seifrim and the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah who lived at approximately 1,000 years after the giving of the Torah, and in the time in between and in the beginning of the era of the second Beis HaMikdash. And to a great extent, the discussions we've had are actually based on a number of Maamarim in Torah Or itself, where the Alter Rebbe explains this difference. In a few words, the difference between Torah, how it existed for the first 1,000 years, and how Torah changed as a consequence, subsequently afterwards, is that for the first 1,000 years of Jewish history, the center of Jewish life, if you will, the ultimate goal of a Jew was to be inspired. In other words, to have Ruach HaKodesh, or on a higher level still, to have Nevuah. It was an era of great spirituality, but not spirituality that's without a direction. A spirituality which is connected to God, godly spirituality, or godliness, which involves, of course, great humility and great enlightenment. Of course, during the period of the first Beis HaMikdash, there were still halachas, there were still tayag mitzvahs, and there were dinim, and there were things that people needed to do and things that people were not allowed to do, and they came from the Torah. And the Torah, loy b'shamayim, Torah is not learnt with inspiration, with prophecy. Torah has to be understood intellectually. But because of the inspiration that people had, because of the Ruach HaKodesh, the divine spirit that prevailed in the era of the first 1,000 years of our history, the time of the Beis HaMikdash, particularly in Eretz Yisrael, paskening halachas and understanding the intellect of the halachas was a small feat. It was not a big deal. It was a byproduct of the fact that people were inspired by a Ruach HaKodesh. In other words, I'm saying two things. There was certainly a inyan from Chochmah, the Seichel, that determined the halachas of Torah Sheba'al Peh. But at the same time, because of the incredible presence of Ruach HaKodesh, paskening halachas was a trivial matter. Like the Alter Rebbe describes in Gemarah HaKodesh Chavav, how things are going to be when Mashiach comes, that when you're in a world of inspiration, so understanding the Seichel HaTorah is a small feat, is a small thing. And accordingly, the way halachas were determined, were paskened, were by looking in the Chumash. I heard once from a Yid who's reliable. I didn't hear this myself, but he told me that the Rebbe once said in the Fabrengen that during the time of the first Beis HaMikdash, people used to pasken halachas from the Chumash like as if it's the Shulchan Aruch. Now anybody who's read Chumash knows that the Chumash is a very far cry from the Shulchan Aruch. Everything is very cryptic and very subliminal and very, very vague. How do you open up a Chumash and pasken halachas? And of course the answer is, if you open up a Chumash and you see Ruach HaKodesh, divine spirit, and along with that divine spirit comes intellectual interpretation. So the way you determine a halacha ultimately is based on your Chochmah Bina Vadas, your understanding. But because your understanding is inspired by an enlightenment, by a Ruach HaKodesh, it's to use a Chassidic expression, it's all b'derech eir yashar, it's direct. In other words, you never have a difficulty figuring out what's the correct understanding of the halacha, because you can see the oir, the Ruach HaKodesh of the halacha. And accordingly, of course, one of the key differences between that period and what would happen later was maintained. And that was, halachas were not transmitted from a generation to a generation. We had the mitzvahs. And the mitzvahs, of course, came from Moshe Rabbeinu at Sinai. And I've discussed with you that the Parshas Shemos, the Rambam writes that Moshe Rabbeinu actually came down from Har Sinai. He literally described how you should do each mitzvah practically. So the mitzvahs did not have to be interpreted. They knew what tefillin was, they knew what mezuzah was, knew what a matzah was, and so on. The halachas came in when questions arose, when you had specific difficulties in understanding how to perform a particular mitzvah, when you had certain doubts and so forth. So they looked into the Sefer Torah, they saw the Eira Torah, the light of the Torah, and along with the Eira Torah came the Chochmas HaTorah, and they paskin halacha. So every Bezdin, every Sanhedrin, paskin separately. And the idea that since in the previous generation they paskin one way, did not necessarily mean that the Sanhedrin in the next generation would paskin the same way. They did independently, so to speak, their own interpretation of the halachas based on understanding of the Torah, which was so closely linked to their inspiration, to the Ruach HaKodesh. When the first Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, so the same collection of people first took the title Seifrim, Al Shem Seifrim Eis Yiseh Shel Torah, and they sealed the Torah Shebeksav, they finalized the Tanakh. And of course, to do this, they had to be great Nevi'im, prophets, because they had to determine which Sfarim to include and what Sfarim to not include, and also which versions were correct down to the specific letters. And after Tanakh was sealed, these same men changed hats and they became the Anshe Knesset Hagedela. And the Anshe Knesset Hagedela made many takonas. And one of them was that when a halacha is determined by a particular bezdin, this halacha has to be carried over to the next bezdin and the next bezdin until the end of time, unless there would be a bezdin at some later date that would be godel b'chochma u'b'minyan, greater than the earlier bezdin, both in terms of its intelligence, in terms of this size, the number of rabbis sitting on the court, and they would have the authority to overturn halacha from an earlier generation. Because what the Anshe Knesset Hagedela were anticipating was the end of Ruach HaKodesh, the end of Nevuah. During the time of the Anshe Knesset Hagedela, there still was Ruach HaKodesh, there was still Nevuah. Shimon HaTzadik was the last, or one of the last of the Anshe Knesset Hagedela, and he passed away 40 years after the second Beis Hamikdash was built. And so long as he lived, they had all the miracles, they had the Ruach HaKodesh as Man Bayesheni. They departed with him. When he passed away, all the godliness dissipated. So during the era of the Anshe Knesset Hagedela, there still was Ruach HaKodesh. Nevertheless, they anticipated the end. They saw that Nevuah would stop, at least the predominance of Nevuah would stop, the widespread availability of Nevuah would stop, Nestalka Nevuah. So they therefore introduced binding Torah Shebal Peh. And of course, as the story goes, and I've explained this before, this is what the Tztukim and Baitusim were. Tztukim and Baitusim were Talmidim of Antigonus, who were the Talmud of Shimon HaTzadik. When, as long as the Anshe Knesset Hagedela were alive, and they themselves were Nevi'im Ba'alei Ruach HaKodesh, and they made these new rules, nobody could question them. But when they passed away, and Antigonus succeeded Shimon HaTzadik, they began to question every little thing Antigonus said, until they were able to punch holes in his opinions and his theories and ideas that he taught, of course, incorrectly, and the argument became, let's continue how things were in the times of the first Beis HaMikdash, where the center of Jewish life was Ruach HaKodesh and Nevuah, and everything was about the inspiration, and the details of halacha were not that important. And that's the story that Tztukim and the Baitusim, and then later on the Kroyim. But of course, the Chachamim followed, and we continue to follow till this day, the enactments of the Anshe Knesset Hagedela, that now halachas are binding. Why? Because in the absence of Ruach HaKodesh, the center and essence of Jewish life becomes Seichel alone, Chochma alone. And in a world where there's no Ruach HaKodesh, and all there is Chochma, when the Chachamim fixed the halach, we believe that there was a Ruach HaKodesh, a subliminal Ruach HaKodesh, and their fixing of the halach. And that halacha becomes binding unless a greater bezdin will overturn it. This was a way of preserving Jewish continuity. In other words, and this is a language which is in our learning very uniform, because we've used these forms many times over the course of the years, and it's of course based on Tanya. Torah has ponim and achet, a front and a rear, a face and a back. The face of Torah is Ruach HaKodesh and Nevuah, where you see Or, godliness. And the Acherayim, the rear of the Torah, is Havana Vasaga, Seichel. In the time of the first Beis HaMikdash, there were both of those things, because halachas have to be determined by Seichel, not by Ruach HaKodesh. But they were very close, and the Ruach HaKodesh inspired the Seichel. One who was inspired had an easy time understanding the Torah intellectually and knowing what halacha should be. When the Anshe Knesset Hagedela saw that Ruach HaKodesh and Nevuah were going to subside and end, Batla, Nistalka, so in a preemptive way, they re-centered Yiddishkeit. That instead of the center of Jewish life being Ruach HaKodesh and Nevuah and everything radiating from that, the center of Jewish life would now become the Beis HaMedrash and the learning of Torah intellectually, Havana Vasaga, understanding. And of course, it's this way until this very day that the greatest inyan in a Yid is one who learns Torah and understands the Torah intellectually, and if he's Zeiche, he's Mechaven Lamitasa Shal Torah and Paskins Halachas. So there was, so to speak, an official point at which the definition of the Jewish people as a nation and as a religious identity was basically changed. For the first 1,000 years of our history, we were at our core spiritual and based on prophecy, and the ideas and the actions radiated from that. And after that first 1,000 years, for the next 2,500 years, we've become a nation whose center is understanding, intellect, seichel. And interpreting the Torah using the principles of the Torah Shebaal Peh that interpret Torah Shebeksav and understanding things. And of course, a very important part of that became the from a debate and Paskining Halacha Acharei Rabbim and so on. I'm going to repeat everything I just said one more time, but I'm going to say it in different words. In other words, Torah Shebeksav, the scripture, the written Torah, and particularly the Chumash, have within themselves many halachas. They of course have all of the mitzvahs and they have many, many halachas. But the basic definition of Torah Shebeksav is Gili Alakus, is revealed godliness. The fact that along as a byproduct of the Gili Alakus of Torah Shebeksav are also the halachas and the mitzvahs is a secondary thing. It's an automatic byproduct which exists in the presence of Ruach HaKodesh. There's going to be also Chochma Bina Vadas, Havana Vasaga as a byproduct, which is going to help us determine the halachas. But the center is Elikus, is the godliness. Or in the language of the Alter Rebbe in Tanya, Torah Shebeksav is called Mikra, Mem Kuf Reish Aleph, and the Shadish is the three letters Kuf Rav Aleph, which means to call, Kuf Reish Aleph, which means to call. And we all know what the Alter Rebbe writes in Tanya, and then the Perek Lamed Zayin, that the reason it's called Mikra, because it's Ka'adam HaKedi Lechavere, or Ka'av HaKedi Lebnei. When you're learning Torah Shebeksav, Kol HaTorah Kula Shmeisav, Shal HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When you're learning Torah Shebeksav, you're calling the Eibishter by name, and in calling him by name, you're revealing his godliness. This is Torah Shebeksav. When Torah Shebeksav was sealed, we were introduced to Torah Shebaal Peh. Torah Shebaal Peh is basically Acherayim, Seichel, Havana V'Asaga. Again, Torah Shebeksav is Ponim, is godliness, and as a byproduct of the Ponim, there's an Acher, but it sort of tumbles out of it as a byproduct. And Torah Shebaal Peh is where you don't have the Ruach HaKodesh and the Nevuah, you only have Havana V'Asaga, so you work very, very hard to be Mechaven Lamitasa Shal Torah, to understand the Torah correctly in your Seichel. And if you're Zeicha, the Eibishter gives you a Ruach HaKodesh in a subliminal way. But your endeavor, your effort, your Mesiras Nefesh is to understand the Torah intellectually. So during the era of Torah Shebeksav, there was a Ruach HaKodesh, which was the Ponim and the basis for the Acherayim. And once the era of Nevuah, once the era of Torah Shebeksav ended and we began the process of Torah Shebaal Peh, the essence of what we have as Havana V'Asaga is Seichel, and this is what Torah Shebaal Peh is all about. So we're learning a Maamar. And one of the many ways of describing the Maamar is Eile Shmeis B'nei Yisrael Haboy Mitzrayim. So the pasuk is divided in half, and we learned the first few words of this pasuk on page line 174. Eile Shmeis B'nei Yisrael. That the idea of B'nei Yisrael, the Jewish people, is to Eile Shmeis, reveal the names of Hashem. The names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu are in Atzilus, and specifically the primary name of the Eibishter, which is Yud Kei Vav Kei, and Eile Shmeis, how the Jewish people reveal the godliness in Atzilus. And this was last week's discussion, where we learned about Mikra, Torah Shebeksav. And Mikra is Eile Shmeis. The whole idea of Chumash and Tanakh is that it's revealing the Eibishter's names, because every single word is a name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And as I'm developing this idea now, this means that Torah Shebeksav is godliness. And from the godliness comes the Havana V'Asaga, almost as a byproduct. I've told this to you in the past, that this is one of the explanations for Meturgaman, right? We all know that in the times of the Chazal, they used to have a Meturgaman. Someone would read the Chumash, and someone would interpret it. The Chumash as well as Navi. We no longer have a Meturgaman. The person who reads the Torah, no one translates. And of course, The explanation which is normally given is because we all know the psukim, we have printed chumashim. It's not like in those days when people came to shul and listened bal peh, orally, and needed someone to help them understand. We can read it ourselves. But one of the ways of explaining it is a deeper thing. A person reads a pasuk. That pasuk has a translation, but that pasuk primarily has an inspiration, a light. The person who hears the reader read hears the specific oyed, the specific ruach hakodesh that this person read in this pasuk, and he gives it over on a level of understanding. In other words, you could read the same words in the Torah 5 times, and in terms of the words it's exactly the same, but in terms of the inspiration there could be 5 different inspirations, and therefore the interpretations will be 5 different things. And the example for this is what you have, Kaddish, 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 right? Kaddish means holy, Kaddish means holy, Kaddish means holy, and in the Targum Yerusim, which we read in the Valatzian, each Kaddish is translated in a different way. So the same Hebrew word, when miturgam, when translated into Targum, has different translations. Because you're going from the ponim to the achar, the face of the Torah, the Ruach HaKodesh of the Torah, the same words, has many different inspirations. And then from it comes the Torah Sheba'al Peh, is how we understand it. And this is how it was in Zman Bayis Rishon. The focus of Jewish life was Torah Sheba'al Mikra, which is Shmeisav Shal HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In other words, when people read the Chumash, they felt godliness, and from the godliness came the ideas. And you can say the same pasuk 5 times, you have 5 different ideas. And that's how they determined halachas. It all came b'derech Or Yosha, from the top down, from the light to the understanding. Once the Torah Sheba'al was sealed, and the ear of Nevuah was nistalic, ascended, it became very rare. And instead of it, you had Torah Sheba'al Peh, Chochmah, which is Acheraim of Torah. So now it's a very, very different thing. Now you have to understand. And you have to struggle to understand the Torah correctly. And there's Maamar Chassidis, especially in the Samach Vav, and I believe also in Shari'era, where the Rebbe Rashab discusses the degree of Yegiya of the Tanoim and Ameroim to understand the halacha correctly. These people literally obsessed over the words and letters of the Torah. In order to understand the halacha correctly, their entire framework, their entire basis to how they determine halachas was based on the words of the Torah Sheba'al. And it was dafke not with Ruach HaKodesh, they were using their minds. And by studying words and letters and nuance, they were able to determine the halachas. And the only way they could be mechaven lameitosei shel Torah, that the halachas that they would come up with were actually the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, was because of their incredible mesiras nefesh to understand it correctly. Emphasis on the word understanding. And this leads us to this week's class. Last week we learned about Torah Sheba'al. And if you remember, we learned the beginning and the end of this discussion on Torah, because we talked about the Atzilus part of it, the Eilish Shmeis. Torah Sheba'al is the Ruach HaKodesh first, and the Chachma and the Avana Vasaga second. And the Avana Vasaga is a byproduct of the Ruach HaKodesh. Later in today's class, the Rebbe is going to indicate, he doesn't say it explicitly, but he says it implicitly, that this is called Bidur Maharish. When you learn Chassidus, you learn, based on Kabbalah of course, that there's a number of Bidurim. And the first Bidur is a Bidur of Ma'amal Ma'ala Lamata. Hashem shines a light and corrects from the top down. And Torah Sheba'al is that way. As opposed to Torah Sheba'al Peh and so on, which is from the bottom up, for Chulos we'll see later on. So we're ready to start. We're on line 71. So we begin on line 71. The discussion we had last week, which was until line 69, and then from line 149, until line 180, which is what we learned last week, was Chumash, Mikra. Now we begin to learn Mishna, Bereisa, and Talmud. What's going to be the issue about Mishna, Bereisa, and Talmud? The basic issue is that all 3 of these things, Mishna, Bereisa, and Talmud, start with Seichel. They start with Ochel, start with understanding. They don't start with Ruach HaKodesh. The question is, if after the Seichel comes a Ruach HaKodesh, in other words, you use your mind to try and understand, and you're misyageya, you toil to the point of mesiras nefesh, and you're zeiched that a Ruach HaKodesh helps you paskin correctly. And the way the Rebbe is going to explain it is, Mishnah always has a Ruach HaKodesh, Talmud never has a Ruach HaKodesh, and Bereisa has Ruach HaKodesh on occasion. And its merum is in the pasuk. What does the pasuk say? Shishim heima malachis, Shmeinim heima pilakshin, va'alomes ein mispar. Malachis means queens, pilakshin means concubines, and alomes means maidens, unmarried women, psulis. And the idea, of course, is that Meloches and Pilakshim and Alomes are the wives of Hashem. Meaning to say all of them are a makabel. The Zohar, the Mashpia, this is the Ruach HaKodesh. The feminine is the Torah Shebal Peh, is the Avon Vasaga. This is the makabel from the Ruach HaKodesh. So a queen is married to her husband. She always has Ruach HaKodesh. A Pilegesh, on occasion, has Ruach HaKodesh. And an Alma who's not yet married, never has a Zohar. She's not married. She never has a Ruach HaKodesh. And this is what we're going to be developing tonight, an understanding of 3 levels of the Torah Shebal Peh. The highest level of Torah Shebal Peh is Mishna, where there's always a Ruach HaKodesh. The second level of Torah Shebal Peh is Bereisa, where you have a Ruach HaKodesh on occasion. And the Talmud never has Ruach HaKodesh, but in all 3, it's basically different, or it's different in a basic way. From Torah Shebal Ksav, because here, even Mishna, the Seichel comes first, and the Ruach HaKodesh comes after, as opposed to in Torah Shebal Ksav, where you first have the Elokus, the shame of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Pneumius, and from the Pneumius comes the Chitzenius. Says the Rebbe, line 71, based on the Pasuk, Shishim Him Malachis, that there are 60 queens. Says the Chazal, Eilu Shishim Mesechta, that goes to 60 Mesechtas of Mishnayos. Shmein, in Pilakshim, there's 80. Pilakshim, Pilakish means a kakibine. Rashi says in a Chubit, this means Belek Subah. Eilu Abraises, this goes on what's outside the Mishnah, as we know what the Chazal tell us. That in the times of the Shas, they were not allowed to write Torah Shebal Peh down. And Rabbi decided, that he had to write down the halacha so it shouldn't be forgotten. And in the generation after Rabbi, there were a series of Tanoim, borderline Tanoim, Rabbi, Rabbi, and others, who wrote down Bereisis, which meant many halachas, which were not included in the Mishnah. And they're called bar, outside of the Mishnah. They're part of the Tkufas HaTanoim, they're halachas psukis, that come from the era of the Tanoim, but they're outside of the Mishnayos. Rabbeinu HaKadosh did not feel they were necessary to be included in the Mishnah. The Rambam writes about the Pirush Mishnayos, that the Rambam, Rabbeinu HaKadosh wrote the Mishnah in such a way that it's Dvarim Ktsarim, Kelim Dvarim Harbe. He wrote it as concisely as possible, and intended that each word should have Dvarim Harbe. In other words, Rabbi felt that if you had the Shisha Sidrei Mishnah, it's enough. Even though at that time, that Rebbe brings down that tough resh, the 600 Sidrei Mishnah, but the Rebbe consolidated the 6 Sidrei Mishnah, and he felt that it was so concentrated that everything you would need to know was there. And the Breises were revealing some of the nuance that the Mishnah felt didn't need to be said explicitly. And then the last thing is Alomes, and Mispen Halachas, maidens, which means women and girls who are unmarried, has no number, it goes on Halachas, which goes on Torah Shebal Peh, goes on the Gemarah. So the Rebbe continues and he says, we're doing Mishnah first, and on line 121 it says the Shmini Pilakshim, we're doing Bereisa, and on line 134 where it says Allah Mesein Mitzvah, we're doing Gemarah. So we start with Mishnah, V'hin Eidim Yinu Mashal Mishnayos LaMalchus. Why do we compare Mishnayos to a queen? Or Kamai Merazal says in the Chazal Masnita Malchus that Mishnayos is like a queen. So the answer is Alpi Maimer Azal, based on what's written in the Gemarah. It's brought in Rashi and Chumash, Isha Mazras Eidim. A woman produces anything that in the body is red. It's a Gemarah Masechta Nida. Sheimena Basar V'chol, which the flesh comes and so on. And the man gives Levin. In other words, Nimta Sheikir Azras Avlad or Metipas Hanukva. The primary development of a baby comes from the female seed. And he brings the K'may Isha Ketazriya V'yolda of a Gemer, that the primary contributor to the creation of a child is a female. Now this Gemarah about Adam and Levin is a little bit hard to understand, but according to Chassidus, this is discussed in a lot of places in Chassidus, that there's 2 tipos. There's the tipas hatchar, tipas hanochid. There's the point of the male, the seed of the male, and the seed of the female. And there's a discussion where the primary yesh meyayin is. Sometimes they say it's in the seed of the male, sometimes the seed of the female, and sometimes in the union. And here the Alter Rebbe argues, and this is what it says in Tanya, and Geras HaKedesh Siman Chav in the second half. And this is how it's explained Lamaskon in Chassidus, that the primary basis for the creation of a child, yesh meyayin, is from the female and not from the male. What about the male seed? Says the Rebbe on line 176, V'tipas tchar, the male seed is rakadei levara tipas nukva. The male seed does not create the child, but it refines the seed of the feminine, so that from within the seed of the feminine, the better parts should contribute to what's more important in the child, and the lesser parts should contribute to what's less important in the child, to produce a healthy child. The preferred and the chosen is the formation of the baby itself, and from the secondary is produced the shilya, the sac, and so on. As the pasuk says, that the Eibishter is Mazriya Chayil, it means he seeds or he winnows. To make clear. So the argument is that in having a baby, the koyach that we believe, of course, Torah teaches us, that every time a baby is born, it's a miracle. The birth of children, reproduction is considered the keach ein seif. It's an infinite power of Hashem that's totally beyond the limitations of the creation, that manifests every time a baby is born, because you're creating a new life, and each life that's born is not born based on the age of the parents, but it's like resetting the clock. Each baby is born as if they're the same age as the parents were when the parents were born, and the age of the parents does not reflect itself in the child. It's restarting all over again. So it's even yesh me'ayin. And this yesh me'ayin is primarily in tipas hanukvas, in the feminine seed. The male seed simply orders it, makes it organized. So the Rebbe says, "V'kachine mishnayis." The same is true in mishnayis. Hein bechinas birudim. The purpose of Mishnah is to fix halachas. In order to fix halachas, you have to have clarity. So there's a combination of two factors that produces the clarity. One factor is b'chochma, is beriru, the clarification comes from chochma. And because there's the manifestation of chochma, there's tamei Torah Or mutter. But chochma is the masculine aspect. Pirush mutter, what is the meaning of mutter? She'eni aser v'kasher b'derech etzedim. It's not tied down in the hands of klipa. And therefore, it can relatively easily be uplifted and included in holiness. Because when you eat kosher, it becomes part of your blood, which gives you life. And then when you use it to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you uplift it. And he explains on line 85 the pshat v'hine. Mikol ma'echal asher yochel. Whenever one eats food, it becomes blood. It says in Chazal that the body is comprised of three basic organs: kav, the liver, the heart, and the mind. And it begins with the liver that cleans up the food and produces clean blood. The blood is refined and cleaned, and that energizes the person with the power of the food we eat, which then becomes blood, which sustains us. He reads Torah and David with all of his heart and all of his soul. So as long as the food is kosher, he can take the energy of that food and uplift it. So when you're eating, when you're learning and davening, you're drawing koyach from the food that you ate. You're elevating the food, assuming it's kosher. But the Mishna has to determine kashrus. In other words, before you can eat it, the Mishna has to decide it's kosher. Because if one eats lots of treif. Even if we were to learn and daven the power of the food that he ate, which was not kosher, in a way which is not hutra and hutcha, the food remains like a stone. It's not uplifted. To be considered as if he's serving Hashem with all heart and his own. So you can't elevate Shalosh Klipas Atmeyas. For who beruri amachol? And this phenomena that the Torah says kosher and treif, and the meaning of kosher and treif is this food. If you'll eat it and you'll use the energy you get from it to serve Hashem, you'll elevate it. It's kosher. This food that you can eat, you would eat, you perhaps, and when you eat it, it would become your energy. If you would then daven and learn, that would not elevate the food, that would be considered asur. Says the Rebbe, who biruri amachol. This is how you clarify food. So there's two steps, obviously. The first step is the rabbi who says kosher or treif. And the second step is assuming they say kosher when a person eats it and then serves Hashem using the energy that he got from that food, he's elevating it further. So there's a birur that determines what is birurable. It's a birur before a birur before a birur. The first birur is the halacha. It says this is kosher. So then when you eat it, you can do a second birur and elevate it through your learning and your davening. And the Rebbe says v'chein birur levush, and the same is true also of clothing. There's kosher clothing and treifa clothing, whether it's shatnez or it's sneas and so forth. Ubatim, same is true of homes. There's kosher homes and non-kosher homes. Mistama mitzad yanim from sneas and asagas gevul and so forth. There's bechinas makifim hine abirur azehu. There is a need to first decide if it's kosher. Is this kosher clothing? Is this a kosher home? And after it's determined that it is kosher, then you wear them or you live in them and you elevate them further through using what you get from them to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay? And this is, so to speak, a birur achar birur. You're using food or a clothing or a home for serving Hashem. Elevating that food, clothing, or a home into Kedusha is predicated on first a Rav determining that it's kosher. When the Rav determines that it's kosher, he creates an initial birur, a first step of clarifying that it can be used in Avodas Hashem for you to be able to mevarer it subsequently when you use it actually in Avodas Hashem. So I'm going to pause here and explain. There's 2 points in this birur. The first point in this birur is called Islapshus, or the Loshes brought in Chassidus, Shein Bana Mizbarer. It's Mizbabish Belvusha Mizbarer. Torah Shabal Peh is Seichel. It's Avon of Asaga. It's understanding. It's not Ruach HaKodesh. Moreover, Torah Shabal Peh is Seichel that deals with physical things. Like the Rebbe was being in the Yem Yem and so on, about the idea of getting into the mind of a liar and trying to think what he's thinking and determining on that basis whether he's telling the truth or not. Mali l'shakin. So, when a person learns Torah Shabal Peh, they're using their mind to understand, to extract from the Torah what's kosher and what's treif. The process of using your mind to understand when reading the Torah what's kosher and what's treif is islapshus. You have to go into the food, intellectually speaking, into the clothing, into the home, and separate what's elevatable and make it kosher and mutter, and what's not elevatable and make it osir and posel. So the first aspect of Mishna, which paskins halacha is hislapshus. Unless you use your mind and you actually invest yourself in the question and in the place of the question, you're not going to be able to paskin. Which of course leads us to a very basic, built-in dilemma, problem. And that is that if you get very, very involved in something to try and resolve it, your involvement in it makes it impossible to be absolutely objective. You can't elevate it without getting involved. But by the virtue of getting involved, you have a subjectivity. It becomes very difficult for you to see it objectively. The mashal which is brought is a person goes out into a diamond mine to extract diamonds. The diamond miner comes out of that mine so filthy that it's impossible to see the benefit of having gone into that mine. It becomes very dirty. Moreover, the diamonds which he mines are also filthy. And it's very difficult to know what's a diamond and what's a pseudo-diamond and what's not a diamond at all and what's a pebble and a rock and so on. And it needs an expert. So the only way to get the diamonds out of the mine is to go down into the mine. But going down into the mine means you have to become a part of the problem. So you go down into the mine, you find the diamond, you take them out of the mine, and you give them to somebody else who's not in the mine, whose hands are clean, and whose face is clean. And he's able to determine where the diamonds are, and how best to access the diamonds, and how best to break those diamonds apart, and to cut those diamonds in such a way that you can get the maximum out of each stone in terms of flawlessness, and in terms of size, and in terms of carats. I understand about diamonds, but other people understand about Pluto. I don't understand very much at all. And the same is true in Mishnayos. For Mishnah to work, there's a combination of 2 factors. There's the intellectual process of the Mishnayos itself, which is the hislapshus, and there is this phenomena which is called b'chochma is beridu, which is we were holding inside. In Abida Zaydei bechinas chochma bechinas Mishnayos. Understand that the word chochma and the word Mishnayos are not the same, because Mishnayos is malchus, Mishnayos is malacha, Mishnayos is a queen. But Mishnayos is a queen who's married to chochma law. She's always in union with her husband with chochma, and it's the combination of the feminine aspect that's mislabish belvusha misbara, the idea that Mishnah means understanding intellectually the reality of the question in order to determine what's kosher and what's not kosher, what's asur and what's mutter, and so on. But in order for that to be objective, the Mishnah is qualified by something which is not beislapshus, which is the concept of b'chochma is beridu. B'chochma is a very interesting concept, and it's discussed in many Maamorim. Particularly Maamorim talk about gvuras of Atik. There's a number of Maamorim talk about gvuras, and whenever they talk about gvuras, talk about Atik. Vayechi, if in Eratera you have Vayechi, and Reish Nun Beis from the Rebbe Rashab you have Vayechi. And of course in later Maamorim you also have this idea, in Ein Beis, in the second Chelik, Barichus, the idea of the birurim of Chochma. And basically the point is as follows. The word birur means to make clear. You only need to make clear when things are entangled. When you have a confusion of good and evil and right and wrong, you need a koyach from outside to shed light and bring clarity into it. And again, there's these 2 sides. On the one hand, if you don't get involved, you can't extract the good from the evil. On the other hand, if you do get involved, it's impossible to be objective of what's the good and what's the evil. So there's 2 factors. There's the investment and the involvement of the Mishnah, and there is the chokhmah that brings a clarity without getting involved, from an indirect association. Chokhmah is called in Chassidus an absolute light. The light of Chokhmah does not get involved in anything, it shines. And the light of Chokhmah is so powerful, it's so deep, that automatically it separates the good from the evil. So Mishna is a joining together of the Seichel and the Hislapshus into the questions of Kosher and Mutter and Posel and Osur and Tomei and so on, and an absolutely removed light of Chokhmah, which does not allow the objectivity to be lost, which shines a light and gives a clarity. In other words, on the one hand, you have to get involved in the confusion to resolve the confusion, and on the other hand, the only way to resolve the confusion is to be totally uninvolved in the confusion. And this combination is achieved from Malchus and Chokhmah. And in the language of this Maamar, this Tasha Mishna. The Mishna itself is a Havana Vasaga, it's a queen. But she's always married to her husband, which is the king, which is Chokhmah. And the Chokhmah is a Lakus, the Chokhmah ain't safe. And because the Mishna is always in touch with her husband, with Chokhmah, there's the perfect combination necessary for the ideal birur. On the one hand, you mavada b'derech eslapshus, on the other hand, you mavada absolutely because it's a birur b'derech eir. So the Rebbe says, and the way I'm reading it is, on the one hand, the bir is associated with Mishna, with understanding, with getting involved. On the other hand, the bir is associated with Chokhmah. So he says on line 92, this notion, that one learns Mishnah, and in the reality of Mishnah, there is the fusion and the joining together of understanding and godliness, says that of bringing into the scenario of Mishnah, which is wisdom, which is higher than wisdom which can be known. In other words, an atzmiyistic wisdom, that a light of godliness should shine to create clarity without investing itself, without involving itself, without getting into the place of the choshech, says the Rebbe, this is why Mishnah was learned by Tanoim. Tanoim were no ordinary people. They were masters of Torah Shabal Peh, which means the intellect of Torah was their forte. But at the same time, they were Tanoim Eisias Eisan, they were Rak. In other words, they were not just intellectuals. They were intellectuals who had at their base something much higher than intellect, which is Elokus. So in the personalities of the Tanoim, you have the two ingredients, which allows Mishnah to do what Mishnah needs to do. They were brilliant intellectuals, but they were anchored in Eisan, something deeper than intellect. And therefore, when they understood the halachas of the Mishnah, on the one hand, there was a hislapshus to understand, on the other hand, there was a chokhmah esberira to create a clarity. As the Pasuk says, that the Tanoim were called Eisanim, that means the strong ones, the rock-like ones, may stay Aretz, who are the foundation of Aretz. Aretz is the earth, which is Teresh Vapel, like it says, of course, in the first Maamar in Teirei and Bereisa. Akshmayim Kisi. Eisanim, Eisi is Tanoim. Eisanim are the same letters as Tanoim. Shem Heim HaMiyastim es HaAretz, who are the foundation of Aretz. What's Aretz? Bechinas Teresh Vapel. So Torah Shabal Peh is understanding. When you and I learn Mishnah, we hear the ideas. But the clarity that Tanoim had was not only because they were so smart and because they worked so hard and argued so much, but because they were rocks. Meaning to say they had inside of themselves the Ruach HaKodesh that came from Chokhmah. And the Chokhmah was beslapshus in their Avana Vasaga to paskin correctly, to be mevader properly. So on the one hand, Mishnah is Torah Shabal Peh. It's not Torah Shabal Peh. In other words, its entire notions you have to understand, Achirayim of Torah, as opposed to Ruach HaKodesh, which is Panim of Torah. But at the same time, it's not only Seichel. It's how the Seichel is connected to Ruach HaKodesh, but in contrast to Torah Shabal, which was last week's conversation, where the Ruach HaKodesh is the source of the Avana Vasaga, here the Avana Vasaga brings with it the Ruach HaKodesh. Because the Pasuk says, Maskel Eisan, that Eisan is called Maskel. And Eisan means a rock. Shemamshich and Bebechinas Maskil, they bring down in as much as their Eisan, they bring it from the level of Maskil, Uksiv Maskal Davachuli, which is a very high madrege of godliness in order to inspire their understanding with objectivity. So this is the combination of Eisan and Avana Vasag. And the Rebbe says in line 98, which is why they're called queens, the union between the king and the queen is constant. They're married. And the union in this case is the seichel aspect, which is mevada by derech eslapshus, is the queen herself. And the chokhmah aspect, the esan aspect, the gevurah savatik aspect, the atzmiyisdik aspect, this is the male, the husband who's constantly in touch and one with the female to create the halachas of Mishna. And this union, it's the masculine clarity, which is trying to resolve the fog of the feminine aspect of Teresh Bapel Vanav Asaga, and it's the joining together of the best efforts of understanding with the Or Abba of Chochma, which creates the beater in a balanced and a correct way. This combination of understanding and beater from an Or Abba, it requires Tanoim, the wise men of the Mishnah. We know that the word Tanoim is the same word Eson. Eson means rak. The Chazal tell us that the Shleisha Avos are called Esonim. A pasuk Tanakh b'Yerach Esonim, which is Chedish Ir, I believe, it goes on the Avos. They're called Eson. Here the Tanaim are also called Eson. Shemakabim Bechinas Chachma, they receive from Torah. What's the constant? Eson is not a level of understanding. Eson is in a level of absolute connection. And the Tanoim are in touch with Eson, and that empowers their understanding to be mevader in a proper way. Al derech Meisha Kibel Torah Misinai v'chulu, just like Meisha Rabbeinu was inspired. Ad Nevi'im Esrul, Anchi Ketzagdel, they were all inspired. Hadei Kabbalah mi Meisha Shebechinas Chachma. So even the Tanoim, who are really the first generation after the basic demise or departure or ascent of Nevuah and Ruach HaKodesh. So they're using the Ravana Vasaga to try and understand. But because they were so close, they had this Kabbalah aspect that along with their understanding, there was Eson, there was Chachma, there was Ruach HaKodesh. So the Bira was constant and was always correct. Valachein, says the Rebbe in line 104, when they had a question, they didn't weigh it intellectually. In other words, they didn't start analyzing intellectual theories as a way of developing the determination of the halacha, but rather, whenever they had a question, they would say, I heard from my Rebbe so and so. Why? Because the notion of using the intellect to resolve a question, which is of course what the Gemarah is full of, is true, where you have seichel with the absence of Ruach HaKodesh, which is what Gemarah is. Since the Tanoim, although they used their minds were inspired by an immediate, by a direct, by an immediately available Ruach HaKodesh. Accordingly, and therefore, they didn't have to use their own minds to resolve a question they didn't answer for. They could rather refer to someone they heard from their teachers, and how that halach was inspired by a chochma, Ruach HaKodesh, to paskin halacha correctly. The Gemarah says, what they received from their teachers till Meisha Rabbeinu. The Gemarah says, some of the halachas he said he heard from his Rebbe. In other halachas he said didn't hear from his Rebbe. But the foundation of their halachas was what they heard from their Rebbe, as opposed to their own pilpul. Says the same thing. Each one was saying what they heard. And the reason is the Tanoim were very bottled like Kadosh Baruch. It doesn't mean they were not intelligent. They were super intellectuals. They were very intelligent. But they appreciated that more or deeper than intellect is Ruach HaKodesh, and although they needed to use their minds in order to paskin halacha, they would always rely on the Ruach HaKodesh, which was behind it, which is represented by the idea of quoting their teachers. Which is what qualified the Tanoim to experience an inspiration from Moshe Rabbeinu's level. The level of Moshe Rabbeinu is bittul min hamayim mishisiu. And therefore, in their Torah there was Eid, in their Torah there was Chachma. I'm on line 110. Mashenkin Eliyahu b'Gematria Ban, as opposed to Eliyahu Navi. Now, Eliyahu Navi lived under the first Beis HaMikdash, and he was certainly a Navi. Nevertheless, we say about Eliyahu Navi that in him there was no Chachma. Ban habitel b'chitzenius. He didn't have this Eid Atzmi, this Eid Abba, and therefore he had to struggle. Godly light was not giving a clarity, and because he had to struggle, he elevated it in his body more than others. In other words, his liability turned into an asset, and his body was also elevated. And according to this understanding, the laws of the Tanoim, as they're written in the Mishna, they're godliness mamish. Now this is a bit of a trick, because it's not elikus mamish. Elikus mamish is teresh b'ksav. It's seichel, but it's a seichel which is linked and joined always to elikus. Is the ma, the chochmeh, which is what's drawn down after the second biddur of ma through chochmeh. Now, when you read these words, it's almost Hard to imagine that the Alter Rebbe is saying this. But I'm going to explain to you what it means. And l'cheira, the Alter Rebbe means exactly what he says. What it means is this. I mentioned to you in the introduction that in Chassidus they speak of birur. Right? Godliness comes into worldliness to bring a clarity into the entangled worldly concealment over godliness. So it says in Kabbalah, and it's brought in Chassidus, that there's 3 birurim. The first birur is called birur rishein milmaylo lamata, which means in plain words that when the Shviras HaKelim of Teo happened, they wish to shine the light, and according to our Maamar here, we know that this light is called an Eir Atzmi, an Eir Abba, the Eir of Chochmah. And the quality and the essence of this light separated out of the Shviras HaKelim, or the broken vessels, the best pieces. And from those best pieces, Atzilus was created. And the rest of it was Nitcha L'chutz. How did that birur happen? B'derech Eir, a light shone. Then what was left, a second light shone on the second light and extracted the second best of the Shviras HaKelim of Teyu and created as Esesphiras of Elam Abriya, and the rest was thrown out, and then again in Yitzid, and again in Asiya. And the klipa that's left was originally B'tachtas Asiya, and Durchet Etzadas became Taruvas Tevaran Asiya. But this is called Bira Momayla Lamata, which means Hashem shines a light and creates a clarity. Down here, we have Taruvas, we have entanglement. Before Chet Etzadas, the Taruvas was Tachtas Asiya, underneath our world. After Chet Hadas, our world itself is the Taruvas Tevara, and we're mavared it through Avodah. But the birur that we do is not B'derech Eir, it's B'derech Eslapshet. The birur that we do is Shem Bana Mizbara Mata L'mayla. So the first birur is Hashem shining a light and creating a clarity because of the Eir Atzmi, Eir Abba. The second is a birur B'derech Eslapshet. In other words, the idea of halachas. You have to understand, then you go down into the situation, then you study it, then you explain it, then you determine what halacha is. But then the Rebbe says that since Mishnayos is always linked to her husband, since Mishnayos, which is the intellect of Torah Or, is always linked to the Elokus, to the godliness of Torah Shabbat, the Rabbi, the Erev Chochmah, there is a quality about Mishnah which is like Mikra. Which means even though Mishnah is mevared b'derech mata l'mata through seichel, Mishnah could also be mevared b'derech eir. In other words, after Mishnah struggles to understand the halacha, the b'chochma is berido that emerges subsequent to that is a godly clarity, as if it's coming from the top down. In other words, Torah Shabbat would be called bira risha in milmayla lamata. The struggle of Mishnah would be called bira milmata lamayla, and the introducing of the Eir Atzmi, of Eir Abba, of Chochmah, into the process of Birur, of Mishnah, would be called Birur Sheni Milmayla Lamata. In short, the Rebbe is saying that not only is Mishnah linked to Ruach HaKodesh, but Mishnah is linked to Ruach HaKodesh in such a kind of a way that the Ruach HaKodesh works almost like Torah Shabbat, B'derech Eir, from the top down. And therefore we have 2 expressions in the Gemarah. One is K'may Merazal Eilu Ve'el David Elikim Chayin. That when the Chachamim argue, we say they're all right, because all of them are not just determining the halacha with their own minds, which is called Ocher, but they're all connected to Chachma, which is the power of Birur, because they're Tanoyim Eis Teyoretz, to shine a light, have a clarity which is Milmayla Lamata. Therefore, they're all correct. And in the Mishnayos, you don't only have the clarity of their intellect, you also have the clarity of their Chachma, their Ein Sof, and their clarity. Their Ein Sof is the Birur Sheni Milmayla Lamata. And then he brings a second example. You're allowed to ask a question on an Amayr of Mishnah. How could somebody say this? The Mishnah says different. You could answer a very simple thing. You say this, I say faket. How do you ask a question from a Mishnah? The Torah says because Mishnah says not I say. Mishnah says I heard from my Rebbe. Because in Mishnah the most important thing is the Ruach HaKodesh. Even though your understanding first, and the Ruach HaKodesh comes second, the Ruach HaKodesh is the primary thing. So you can ask a question on a rabbi, how could you say this? In the Mishnah it says different. Mashenki and Teresh Bapez you're going to see later on. So what is Mishnah? Mishnah is a very interesting thing. On the one hand, it's clear that Mishnah is Teresh Bapez, not Teresh B'Ksav. On the other hand, it has properties of Teresh B'Ksav in a constant way, to the extent that you could call it Birur Beis Milmayla Lamata, Birur Beis of Chochmah. And on this basis, you get to a fascinating idea, which is the notion that Mishnah is sort of in between Teresh B'Ksav and Teresh B'Al Peh. We've had opportunity to discuss what the Rebbe says in the footnote about the Siddur. The Siddur was made by the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, and it says in Sforim that a pasuk of Siddur is sometimes concluded with the word v'chulu, which is an expression used for Chazal, Teresh Bal Peh, and a pasuk of Siddur is sometimes concluded with v'goyme, which is a remez of Teresh B'Ksav. Because Siddur was made by the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, it's right on the precipice, so in some aspects it's like Teresh B'Ksav, in some aspects it's like Teresh Bal Peh. In other words, in some aspects it's Ruach HaKodesh, in some aspects it's Vanav HaSaga. Here the Rebbe says Mishnayos in general is Ruach HaKodesh. Even though Mishnayos is understanding, but the understanding brings to a clarity of Torah, of Ruach HaKodesh. Which explains, I was just thinking this. First of all, I'll tell you a vort, there's a vort that the Radatz was a very, very famous chassid, a very great chassid, David Hirsch Chanin, used to say when he was frustrated by a Mishna, a heilige Mishna, kein Wort nicht verstanden. It's a holy Mishnah, I don't understand a single solitary word. Now what he was trying to connote is it's beyond my understanding. But what he was really trying to connote is that since it's divinely inspired, you never understand it fully. In other words, Mishnah has a Torah Shebiksav property in part. Even though Mishnah is Torah Shebal Peh, first comes the Seichel, then comes the Ruach HaKodesh, but the Ruach HaKodesh that follows the Seichel is so strong, it's as if it's Ruach HaKodesh Malmayla Lamata. And of course this explains, amongst other things, why when a person passes away, we learn Mishnayos. And we say Mishna is Neshama. Because when a person passes away, the guf is gone, and the seichel is gone, all that's left is the neshama. And Torah Shebal Peh, when it comes to Torah Shebal Peh in general, it's only Havana Vasaga. In other words, it doesn't have an appeal to the neshama, because it's seichel. But Mishnayos is on that border between seichel and elikus. And because it's on the border between Seichel and Elikus, Mishnayos can bring out a godliness which is food, is nourishment for the neshama as well. And incidentally, I think on my website I have a class where I have a section on mourning. I have a class where I mentioned this idea why Mishnayos is considered Torah Shebal Peh, and at the same time we call Mishnayos Eisias Neshama, we connect it to godliness and to spirituality and so forth. So the Rebbe says in line 114, which is the basis of why it says the Chazal in Golos Miskantis al B'chus HaMishnayos. And the Rebbe spoke about this Dovshin Beis, and he said that this means halacha psuka, that Golos does not come except in the Chus of Mishnah. Shenem, as the pasuk says, Gam ki yitnu bagoyim, even though they're scattered amongst the nation, Atar Kafna, we're going to collect them. Inyan ki, but Golos is the notion of collecting Jewish people as Inyan Bidder of Avdollah, is to create clarity and to separate Kedusha from Klipa. And it's B'chus HaMishnayos, which is the Ina Birurim Kanal. But Mishnayos is a Birur in a way of Choch. In other words, Mishnayos brings a clarity by, on the one hand, being mislabish, on the other one, by being aloof, the Chochma element. And that's how the Birurim happen. And that's how Mashiach is brought about. Gam Amru, another thing which is written is En Yisrael Nagamon B'Tzedakah. Just like Mishnayos brings Mashiach, Tzedakah brings Mashiach. Shebechin as Aliyah Achar Avdollah, it's in a sense after a separation. In other words, the money which is kosher, and the separation which came before made it kosher, now it's being elevated by giving tzedakah. The pasuk says Chassidus brings it, tzedakah lifts up. The Abish's right hand, which is tzedakah embraces, like it says in the pasuk. And this is Mishnayos. This is Mishnah. That it's seichel on the one hand, and seichel first, and Ruach HaKodesh on the other hand, Ruach HaKodesh for sure, but the Ruach HaKodesh comes after the seichel, which is why it's different than Mikra. Upilak shemelu braises, line 121. The pilakshim are like braises. They're also the halachas of the Mishnayos. They're also halachas psukais, but it's kemoshal hapilegesh. It's not comparable to a wife who's always married to her husband, but rather hapilegesh sheyichud hamelach imo rak bakroyu batznei cholu. The king visits her in a way of akroy. Akroy means incidental or on occasion, coincidentally, and in secret. And most importantly, it's not a relationship, it's a visit. In other words, with a wife, it's a relationship. And of course, the nimshal is that the braises are also chokhmah, that are trying to be mavared halachas, to determine the halacha. The Ruach HaKodesh, the Elikus, which is found in the braises, in order to fix the halachas, is not constant and is not certain, like it is in Mishnah. Mishnah is also understanding, but it's an understanding that's so connected to a Ruach HaKodesh that we can compare it to a Bidur Sheni Mulmailo. Ma. In braises, it's not the case. V'kach, line 123. Similarly, there is a presence of Elikus, of godliness, of Ruach HaKodesh in braises, but it's leprakim, it's on occasion. And he explains the Mishna, the Chazal, if there is a Mishnah that was not taught by Rabbi and Rabbi Eisha, it's not a Mishnah. In other words, by the preferred Bereisas, by the Bereisas that were considered more precise. But it's only comparable to Mishnah, and it's not Mishnah itself. And therefore we say about Bereisa, although on occasion there's Chochmei law, it's not constant. Mashen came masnitin, but Mishnahs are different. Mishnahs are considered so precise and so exact that Moislinim in a Tufta vein lahashav, you ask a question from one Mishnah on halacha. Someone says a din, and you quote a Mishnah. You can refute that person's halacha without him being able to defend himself, because Mishnah is considered halachas, but halachas that are absolutely true because there's Chochmah, there's Ruach HaKodesh, there's Ein Seif behind it. So therefore, Bereisa is different than Mishnayos. They're the same level, written at the same time, and for the most part said by the same people. But in Mishnah, there's always a Ruach HaKodesh, always an Elokus. And in Bereisa, it's not that way. And then the Rabbi continues. Just like we understand that when one learns Mishnah, they're understanding it with their seichel. When one learns Bereisa, they're understanding it with their seichel. But the Mishnah always has a Ruach HaKodesh, and the Bereisa doesn't. It says, the Rebbe, L'maylahu, this is understood in spiritual terms as follows. Inyan Maamar Azal, it says in Chazal that Mechol, Eimedu Makir, Neshamet, Zatzadikim, Al Gabi HaMizbech, that Malach Mechol, who is the official advocate, the official Malach of Klal Yisrael, is sacrificing the souls of Tzadikim on the Mizbeach. In other words, Neshamis want to go into Atzilus, which is which is ain't safe. But to go into Atzilus, you have to lose your whole Metzias. So when Neshama leaves this world and goes Lamaila, and achieves a great level of purification, but it's still in the lower worlds of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiyah, until Michal comes along and raises them up into Atzilus. In other words, it's not an automatic thing. It's done through Malach Michal. Shubachin is bitter on Neshamis. It's the clarification, uplifting of Neshamis. Hara'uyim likol bein seif. And are worthy of going to Ein Seif, which is Atzilus. But it's leprakim. It's intermittent. It's not constant. Because if it would be constant, you wouldn't need Malach Michal to raise them up. They would go there by themselves. So this is the difference between Mishnah and Bereisa. So the point is this. You're learning, using your mind. How do you know you're right? And of course the answer is you don't know you're right. You try your best. And if you're the Tanoim, you're called Eson, you're really being Mesa Nefesh to understand that you're Mechaven Lametasa Shaltein. And in the case of the Tanoim, their Mesiras Nefesh was fortified and made absolutely true by the Ruach HaKodesh, which rested under Avana Vasvak. And by the Tanoim of the Bereisas that's considered outside the Mishnah, it's on occasion. Now goes Gemarah. Listen to this. Line 135. Alomes ein mispar elu halaches shein memres hamiroim. Alomes means unmarried girls, maidens. Which means a woman not attached to a man. That means the seichel of Torah not attached at all to Ein Seif, to the Ruach HaKodesh, to the godliness of Torah. Which is halaches, and the statements of the Amiroim, who also made Piskei Din, also paskin halachas. And they also paskin halachas understanding to the best of their abilities. But they didn't have Ruach HaKodesh at all. And because they did not have Ruach HaKodesh at all, even though we assume that their Seichel was Seichel Amiti, they were Amiroyim, and they also were Mesa Nefesh to understand the Torah truthfully, but because they did not have Ruach HaKodesh, therefore the Loi Mesvinim and now Chufta Klal, you can never ask a question that an Amayra said a halacha, you're not allowed to say different. Or Maamar Azal, the expression of the Gemarah, Gavra Karamis. You can't ask a question from one Amayra and another. Why not? Maybe an early Abayda knows better. The answer is because it's Seichel against Seichel. Mash'enkin Mishna. And even Bereisa, it's a Seichel with a Ruach HaKodesh against a Seichel. And therefore, Nekrayim Alamis Lashon Psulis. They're called Alamis. Maidens means virgins. They have no husband. Adula Kabilas, the Chari Ikri Chulu, they're considered Alamis so long as they have no husband. And of course, the husband is the Eibishter. The husband is the Chochmah. The husband is the Ruach HaKodesh. She'ein Ashraz Chochmah La Datzilas B'teichi. The Chochmah of Atzilus, which is Ein Seif, and it's Mevader through an Eir Atzmi, is not manifesting Gemarah. Ki Talmud Bebriya v'nikra Beirei Cheshach, Talmud is Neil Mabriya, which is Cheshach, She'ein Meir Sham Chochmah La Begili, there's no Chochmah La Begili. Now, if Talmud is Briya, then Mishnah is Yetzirah. So how Mishnah has Chochmah La when Talmud doesn't is interesting, unless you say Mishnah is an Atzilus, which of course you cannot say. So I guess we say Mishnah is Malchus of Atzilus. Rak, but there's a chap. This is very, very important. When you say that the Mishnayos, the Tanoim, use their minds to Mevarer halachas, and they had the Ruach HaKodesh, you're saying two things. Number one, they tried to understand intellectually. And their intellect was correct because it had with it a Mesiras Nefesh. But it was fortified with Ruach HaKodesh. When you say the Amoraim didn't have Ruach HaKodesh, you're not saying that they could make a mistake. You're still saying that the same kind of Yegiyah to be Mechaven Lamitasa Shel Torah to know the truth, but it wasn't fortified from godliness. So if you think about it, ask yourself this question. What's greater? To paskin halachas correctly without Ruach HaKodesh, or to paskin halachas correctly because Ruach HaKodesh helps you? It's a funny question. You know why? Because when you paskin a halacha and Ruach HaKodesh helps you, Ruach HaKodesh came after the fact. You used your mind, and you machav l'mitat shel Torah with your seichel alone, and it was chochma amitis. It was true. The Ruach HaKodesh fortifies it. When you paskin halacha using your own mind, and Ruach HaKodesh does not fortify it in a certain aspect, it's the same as the Mishna, because you're using mind to be mavarer. But the fact that the Ruach HaKodesh does not rest makes it in a way less. But in a way you could make an argument that if a person does not have Ruach HaKodesh, and nevertheless he's mechaven l'mitas shel Torah, it's the ultimate Mesiras Nefesh of Torah. So the Rebbe now says, line 140, Rak shein bechinas kli mochein lashas chochmei la. They're a seat, a vessel, which is a seat for chochmei la to rest. They're qualified for Ruach HaKodesh. In other words, the Amoraim also were Mesiras Nefesh for Torah, and mechaven l'mitas shel Torah, and they were worthy that Ruach HaKodesh should rest, but it doesn't. Kediksiv, the words of the pasuk, besulei sacharei yaseh muvois la tuvalno besmoches v'gil tevehel leheichel melech. That they're psuleis, they've never been married to a man, to a king, and nevertheless they have a shayches to heichel melech. And the same is true of Torah Shabal Peh. In Gemarah, it's pure havana v'asaga. They're mavada d'alachas using their own seichel, and they're so precise in their birur that they're worthy for the Ruach HaKodesh. And the Rebbe says in line 142, this is the pshat, if you could remember, to the beginning of the Maamar. When we talked about Yidin in Mitzrayim, we had Kal v'cheim, and Kal v'cheim, and Levenim, do Liban Hilchas. Remember that, right? He had several different expressions, and one of them was Liban Hilchas. You had Cheimer is Dok Kal v'cheim, and Cholaveda Besada is Bereisa, and Levenim is Liban Hilchas. So Liban Hilchas, Levenim goes on Gemarah. You have to make the halachas clear when you're using your own mind, where there's no Ruach HaKodesh. To bring down upon them Chochmei Law, and of course, in Libun Hilchaseh, it's only Torah Shabal Peh. There is no Torah Shabiksav. So this is the conclusion of our Torah conversation. It took us 2 classes. Last week we learned about the Torah of Atzilus, which is Torah Shabiksav. This week we learned about Mishna, which is Malchus of Atzilus, and Bereisa, which is a lower level, and Talmud, which is in Bria, which is Seichel without any Ruach HaKodesh. And of course the Nimshal is going to be when you go into Golus, the Torah goes into Golus, and the godliness is more and more concealed. And that's the pshat, not Eilish Shmeis, but Aboyim Mitzrayimah, which is going to be discussed in our Maamar on line 190, which we're going to pick up in Mitzvah Hashem with Hashem's help next week.